Hi there guys, welcome back to another video, and in this week's video we're going over a commonly debated topic about being young in property and if you can actually do it or not. If you do enjoy the video, please do consider leaving a like and subscribe if you haven't already, but without further ado, let's just jump straight into it. So let's first start with some of the drawbacks to being young in property. I mean, if you're in your 20s and you're already in property, then you are one step ahead of the competition. But don't get me wrong, there are still a few negatives that you need to be aware of. So the first negative is the compliance and legal side of things. Now again, this doesn't really apply to everyone. It only applies to the people that are under the age of 18. And again, if you are under the age of 18, you might find it a bit difficult to, set up the compliance if you're a sourcing company or sign legal documents if you are looking to buy a house. Now this is quite a difficult one because there's not too many ways around it. If you're hoping to set up a sourcing company, then you can co-source with a fully compliant company. If you're looking to buy a property, then you might have to do it under your parents' name or something. But again, it's not really something you can kind of loop around and get it in your own name because you do have to be 18 to sign the majority of these legal documents. Now again, this is probably the biggest negative when being young in property, but again, this only does apply to a very small minority. That's only because there's not a lot of people under the age of 18 actually in property. I mean, if you are, then again, that's absolutely amazing. But again, you might struggle to do some things like the legal and the compliance side of things. So the second negative you kind of need to be aware about when you are entering the property space is you might not get taken seriously at first. Now again, because property is kind of like a middle-aged people's kind of game, when someone young kind of steps into it, you are judged quite often because, people kind of think you don't really know what you're talking about. Now, the way to get around this is actually to, seem very knowledgeable, serious, and professional. If you can kind of perfect all these, then people won't really have a point in actually kind of judging you because you actually know what you're talking about. But yeah, again, this really only comes from people that, are quite naive when they come into property and they're young. They think it's going to be really easy. They've maybe been on a course or two and they kind of think they know everything, which, everyone was there when they first started, but it's all about having an open mind and actually being willing to learn with these people. If someone is kind of stepping over you and judging you, then you kind of just want to ignore them because they're not really going to help you at all. And that kind of leads me to my next point about this negative. When you are starting in property and you are young, the worst thing you can kind of do is almost be treated like the victim. You don't want people kind of stepping over you, bothering you, and not really taking you seriously. You kind of do need to kind of stand your ground in that sense. But again, this doesn't really happen in the property community, especially when we started, everyone was really, really supportive. Don't get me wrong, you are going to have those people that kind of judge, but again, they're not really going to bring anything good to your life, so you might as well just ignore them. But 9 times out of 10, the actual property community is really, really nice, especially if you're young and just starting out. And in all fairness, those are kind of two of the biggest negatives that I can kind of think of. Obviously, one of them, the fact that if you're under 18, you can't become like legally compliant. That's quite a difficult one to get around. There are still ways to get around it, but again, it's just kind of one of those things. And then the second one about being taken seriously, you can get this even when you're 25 in that sense, but it's just ensuring that you do come across professional, knowledgeable, and serious. Otherwise, people will kind of, just step all over you. But apart from those two, those are kind of the biggest negatives that I can really think of. But now in terms of the positives, and I promise you these positives do outweigh the negatives quite significantly. The first one, and probably the most important one, is time. If you're in your 20s, you've got so much time ahead of you, and kind of the benefit to this is the ability to try loads of different things out. In property, there's so many different strategies. I'd be here all day if I was to list them all out, but the great thing about being young is that you can almost kind of try as many of these things out, get to know which ones you like, which ones you don't like, and then kind of just progress from there and really, really go forward with a strategy that you do enjoy. On top of that, another reason why time is absolutely amazing is because if you do mess up and you do end up kind of failing, then again, you've still got loads of time ahead of you to kind of perfect it and learn from your mistakes. The only difficulty with this one is when you are in your 20s and mid-20s, you're more than likely going to have a full-time job, and kind of balancing that with property is quite difficult. Definitely not impossible, but that will probably be the most challenging thing you experience. But again, it's an absolutely amazing feel when you can actually go full-time in property and almost dedicate your whole entire day towards it. So the second positive, and again, this is one that is really, really good for the youth, is the ability to kind of have a fresh outlook on the property industry. Now, I'm sure we all know people in the property industry are quite, middle-aged, very strict and, by the book in that sense, and not very exciting, which is why the young people that are kind of getting into it now are really bringing a bit more energy and creativity into the market. This usually comes from spending a lot of time online. us young people are always online, but the middle-aged people, they don't really go on as much because, social media is still relatively new. And the fact that we can kind of like perfect it and kind of work around it does give us a really, really big advantage. As obviously, if you're not on social media in 2021, then you're clearly not doing something too right. But the fact that if you can kind of perfect the creative, the marketing side of things, and you're really going to be successful. Now, property is one of the many few industries that hasn't really had, too big of an upgrade. Especially with technology, it's still quite a corporate and boring industry, and you just have to make sure that you spice it up for the enjoyment of yourself, but also to kind of think differently to the competition and stand out really. So again, those are just some of the positives and the negatives when being young in property. Me personally, there's so many more positives to negatives, especially if you do come across knowledgeable in that sense, then people really are going to take you seriously. If you are under 18, it will mean it will be slightly more difficult, but never say never, there's always a way around everything. So you really do just want to have it bad enough to actually go and get it. And obviously, if you are over 18 or 18 and below and kind of doing your own thing, you obviously do want to come across a professional. The worst thing you can do is kind of come across too professional and corporate in that sense, because then you're not really going to stand out. You're just going to be like everyone else in the property industry. You kind of want to bring your personality into it, the things you're really good at. So maybe that's marketing and like creative work. You really want to bring that into your like social media, for example, and then more than likely you will be successful. But overall, the positives are significantly greater. Firstly, you have so much time, which kind of allows you to trial new things out and really allow you to understand the different strategies in property. And obviously also if you fail at a few things, you've still got loads of time ahead of you to kind of perfect it in that sense. And obviously one of the most important ones is that you can have a fresh outlook on the industry and hopefully bring something different to the industry, which will kind of help grow your business. Of course, there are so many more positives and negatives. So again, if I have missed any, please do comment them in the comment section below. If you have enjoyed the video, also please do consider leaving a like and subscribing if you haven't already. But until next Wednesday, we'll see you soon.